You are listening to the Hello World Podcast number 45. My name is Sean Williamuth and I am your host. The Hello World Podcast is where you can hear from some of your favorite developers, authors, and speakers about how they got started in this business and the decisions they made along the way. We go way back to their first computer, their first code experience, and their first job. On today's show I have Deborah Kurata. She's an independent software consultant and developer specializing in web and .NET development using AngularJS, VB.NET, and C#. She has also published several Pluralsight courses. Deborah has authored several programming books including Doing Object series and is a speaker at conferences such as VSLive and TechEd. She is also the co-chair of the East Bay .NET user group in the San Francisco Bay, Silicon Valley area. On today's show, we get to talk to Deborah about what you're going to do when you grow up. Deborah talks about the common problem of knowing what you're going to do until you fall into it, and Deborah tells her story about how that happened. We also delve into how her Macintosh 128K computer helped her get an A. Let's take a listen. I'm excited to have our next guest. I've been hoping to get Deborah Kurata is on the show, and we're going to talk about how she got started. How are you doing?
Well, how are you?
I'm good. I never figured out exactly where you're from. I figured out that you were on the West Coast because of your time zone, but that's about all I know.
I'm in the Silicon Valley area.
Oh, okay.
I'm just north of Silicon Valley and just east of San Francisco, so I can have clients in both places.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
That's really nice. And you're a Pluralsight author as well.
Yes.
You've been doing pretty well lately. It looks like some of your courses have been really hitting the top 10, which is great.
Yeah, I just did AngularJS line of business applications, and that one seems to be doing quite well. Prior to that, I had some C# and Visual Studio courses that also did pretty good. So that's really fun to see that happening and to get feedback from people.
That is awesome. So, of course, you know the nature of the show is about your story, how you got started. Where did you start touching your computer first? Was it in college? Did you have one as a kid?
Like several others that I know, programming began with me in college with a Fortran course.
Nice.
I absolutely hated it and never pictured myself doing any coding ever again. I instead graduated with a degree in math and physics.
Oh, nice.
Because, they were interesting. I enjoyed it. It challenged me. And it was fun at the time.
At the time, what happened then?
Excuse me. Well, as you might guess, you can't just graduate with an undergraduate in physics and go out and get a job. So I was one of those people that didn't have any idea what I wanted to do. And when I talked to my youngest daughter about, her generation and what she would be interested in hearing about in a conversation like this, the whole job thing was one of the things that she was most interested in hearing about. I think that these days that we expect our kids, sometimes the schools as early as 8th grade are trying to get a handle on, what do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to go? Because that'll matter what courses you take in college. And I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Does anyone know? I mean, that seems preposterous. I remember those questions when I was a kid and I was like, either I'm going to be a rock star, I'm going to race cars for a living, or I'm going to be a fireman. And that's... I was going to be an astronaut and an FBI agent. Nice.
I think it all has to do with what you watch on TV, but
I really think it is. And so how did that evolve? Was it something more natural? You got your first job and that sort of got you interested, or was it that you really had to seek out what you were going to do?
Well, as I said, I got my degree in math and physics, and when I graduated, I had just no idea what I could really do, and I didn't have the funds to actually get you have to get a PhD really in order to get a good job in physics. And I didn't have the money for that. I was one of those, poor students. I did go to graduate school anyway because, I didn't want to work at McDonald's and I just had no idea what I wanted to do. So luckily, I just picked a very inexpensive graduate school. And one of the first things I did was start to look for a job. And this cute guy who sat behind me in my math phys class got me a job in the computer lab on campus.
Nice.
And that cute guy is now my spouse.
Wow.
So it was just a really perfect storm, only in a good way, because I both met him and met my job at the same time. So at the computer lab, when we weren't helping other students, they had us writing code. So we were writing computer-based training courseware for chemistry.
Nice.
Using a digital equipment PDP 1145 and BASIC.
And so you were writing the software to deliver the CPTs, or were you writing the actual courseware?
Yeah, we were writing the courseware.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because back in the days, we didn't really have, applications that you could use to build it. So we were actually building, the questions and answers in code.
Oh, wow.
Because we didn't have a database or anything.
Sure.
We actually just were writing the questions and answers in code. So every little module of the course had to have its own set of code at the time. And the woman that I worked for then taught me structured programming. And I loved it. I loved its elegance, its structure, its logic, its clarity. I just really, at that point, fell in love twice, both with the nice guy and with this coding. It was great. And so when I ran out of money, I got a job. And with the experience from the computer lab, I was able to get a job programming on a PDP and then a VAX using VAX Basic.
Nice. So this falling in love with the structured programming I'm interested in, because you hated Fortran. And what did you see as the difference between them?
Well, with Fortran, it was all just syntax.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't... we created an application to calculate Fibonacci numbers and bowling scores. And it wasn't,
wasn't practical enough, or was it
wasn't practical, and it wasn't really, you didn't have enough to really learn about structured coding.
I see.
You learned about your little routine that you were creating that, maybe for Fibonacci numbers was recursive, but, and other than that, it wasn't a whole application that you were creating that did something, and you could see it, improving over time. It just wasn't. That's lovely. It wasn't very exciting to me. Maybe it was the course, but
that's always a possibility. So are you one of these people who really thrive on not only, producing code, but seeing that code out, watching users work with it, and, we're making a different sort of case?
Yes, I do really enjoy that. And also, I just feel like since that woman that I met that really got me started and got me excited was such a help to me. And I know Kathleen already talked a lot about mentoring, but I feel that with that, I sort of owe back, and I try to, provide that same kind of information back to others, which is why I did the course, Pluralsight course on defensive development, which is basically that whole idea of, good structured programming, and then the object-oriented programming Pluralsight course. And, the related books on object-oriented programming, I all felt the need to kind of give back kind of what I'd learned.
That makes a lot of sense. Did you realize you were learning from this woman that you first started with? Did you realize you were learning how to mentor other people at the same time? Obviously you knew you were learning programming, structured programming and such. Did you see these soft skills happening at the same time, or was it only in hindsight?
it wasn't until I actually got my first job and saw how they were coding that I realized how great of skills that she had given to me, because a lot of the other people that they had hired, because right when I got hired, the industry was growing like crazy. And so I got to meet a lot of other new developers as well, and saw the difference between the background that I had coming from learning from her versus the background of people actually with CS backgrounds in terms of how organized it was. And maybe I didn't understand at the time really, what is a linked list? Well, somebody's going to need to explain that to me because I had no idea.
Sure.
We didn't have that in my math classes, but the whole idea of having it well structured and, testing didn't seem to be really covered that well in college either at the time. I think it probably is now, at least I would hope so.
Hopefully.
But a lot of that was, thanks to her. And I think I realized it when I got that first job.
So when you finally left the computer lab and started working in this first company, you were working with a lot of new people. What did that feel like? Was that a much larger environment than you had in college, or?
Yeah, and one of the really cool things about that is I like to learn, and I have always liked to learn. And I know Kathleen had said that as well, that I think a lot of us in computers now do love to learn because we have to be, because it's changing so quickly. But having an environment like that where suddenly there was 40 people that I could talk to. So there was something back in the day called a null device on a VAX computer, and I could not grok what that was. And I must have asked 12 different people to explain it to me, when finally that last person, I don't remember what they said, or maybe they had a good comparison for me, a metaphor or something. But it's when you really are seeking skills, you'll just keep asking and asking, and to have a huge group of other developers there that all were, kind of coming together and trying to learn as well. It really was an exciting environment at the time.
And you were doing basic on VAX then? Is that, did I remember that right? And did you come into sort of the PC world at some point?
Yes. I got a job in Silicon Valley doing both project management and C++. And that's kind of where the next twist in my career came. The company I worked for several years, seems like it was 5 or 6, got bought out, and they moved the company to LA. And surprisingly, none of the team members wanted to move to LA.
They'd been to LA, evidently.
Yeah. So nothing bad about LA for any of those listening from there, but the company then hired me as a consultant to finish up some of the code and to transition to the new team. So I was suddenly self-employed and working out of my house. And it just so happened that at the time I was 6 months pregnant with my second child and was not in a very good position to go interview for another job. I did go on a couple of interviews, and they just looked at me like, are you sure you're going to be coming back? How long you're going to be gone? And nothing happened. So that just, again, two things kind of converged at the same time and really led the direction of my career, because at that point I launched out on my own and have never looked back.
And was that a big risk for you? Was that a, emotional, obviously you had the second child on the way, and so you may have had some impetus for at least wanting to write out that contract, if nothing else. But did you realize what a big change in your life it was going to be?
Yes, and it was very scary at the time. We didn't have all that much money. We had just moved into a house here, and houses are really expensive here.
They are.
And so it was very scary. The really good thing was that through a prior coworker, I got one of my first real consulting gigs, not just the little piece of work from my prior company, with Alan Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Alan, the father of Visual Basic?
I think some of us have heard of him.
Yeah. So that really made a huge difference because, through that, I started using Visual Basic. And that was kind of cool because every time I guessed what the syntax might be, it was so close to VAX Basic that I had worked on, years before. And so it was a real easy move from doing C++ to going to Visual Basic. And from there, things just escalated, and I was just insanely lucky how it all fell into place.
That's lovely. And at what point did you start thinking about something more than just slinging code, as it were? Because you're an author of some books, and obviously the teaching and such. When did that sort of shift happen?
Well, one of the problems with working from home, as I'm sure, a lot of people who have done it know, is that you're alone.
Yeah.
So here I was learning kind of a new language. It was VB2 at the time, very quickly later to VB3. And I could, guess some stuff because it was similar to a VAX, but there was still a tremendous amount that I didn't know. So I started asking questions, and then shortly after answering questions on CompuServe, I started attending the local user group. So once a month, Mom had her night away from the family and went to our local user group, which again, Silicon Valley, it was an absolutely amazing place to have a user group. I got up enough courage to actually speak at the user group. And do you know Robert Scoble?
Yes.
Okay. Robert Scoble was in the audience. He's a very, very old friend of mine because this was probably mid 90s, 94, 95 or something. He connected me with VBPJ, who he worked for at the time. I got my first article published. He helped me get my first talk at the second annual VBITS conference, which was the precursor to what's now VSLive. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I was really lucky to have found someone like Robert that really got me kind of to the next step, because once you start getting articles and you start getting people wanting you to write books, and then you have talks, and because of the books and because of the talks, you get more talks, and it just sort of snowballs from there.
Yeah, it's an interesting period in a career. Because did you find it hard staying close enough to the code to be able to write the articles and books, or were you still taking on clients at the time?
I definitely was taking on clients. There was a short period of time when my company got big. We had as many as 30 people actually working at one point. And when it got to be that big, I found that I couldn't really code as much. And it was really kind of a disappointing time because it was right around when .NET first came out.
Oh, right.
And so I'm hearing about all this .NET, I'm seeing all the developers kind of starting to learn it, and I'm completely out of time at the end of my day to be able to really spend the time with it. And it was really a frustrating time for me. So
sort of the golden handcuffs. You have this thing that you're driving forward this business, but you'd also have that that germ of curiosity that never left you is still there. And how do you feed both sides equally?
Yeah, and that's when the bad things that ended up to be good things, I guess, started happening. Here in Silicon Valley, all of a sudden there was a huge shift to offshoring, and we lost some really big clients I won't mention all of their names, but we had some of the big companies down in Silicon Valley, and they all, we'll be ending your contract now. We'll be ending your contract now because we're going offshore.
Right.
And the second thing then that happened was the end of that huge .NET bubble. And so all of the work that we had been doing on all these startups to do all of this web code in ASP and VB6, we lost all of that as well. So we went from almost 30 to like 5 in the matter of a year.
Wow.
And then slowly down to 2. So now it's just my business partner and spouse and myself, which means then for however many years that's been since all of that, that we have time to actually do the code. And, I wouldn't have been able to do my Angular course without having actually done an Angular app for one of my clients and gone through the frustration of why can't I find this?
Right.
Why can't I figure out how to do this? Well, if I can't find where to do it, maybe other people can't find where to do it either. And maybe I should share that. And so then again, I feel like I want to give back what I've struggled with to learn myself.
And so I talked with one of our other guests about this before. There's this period that, a lot of us want to create, a company where we can work at home and consulting. And then there seems to be this pressure to, I need to hire a bunch of people because the only way I scale out is add more people on projects and I become more of a project manager and all that. And for some people, it seems to be a law of diminishing return, right? At some point, you are spending all your time managing these people. And even though the money might be good, you're not any happier than you were when it was just the two of you. Did you find this true since you sort of went through that cycle when you came back to, more of the mom and pop consulting company at the end?
Absolutely. I mean, at first, you first lose all of that. You feel just depressed. I mean, I went through several years of just depressed because these people were my friends and, some of the clients were my friends and, to have suddenly lost all of that. And, again, the big loss happened rather quickly. And it was just, it took me literally several years to kind of get out of the doldrums and feel excited again about things. And, but once I got past that point, I've been just extremely happy just being, every once in a while, my partner will talk about, here we could get this big project and we can bring on some more people. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that again. And I am finding a lot of happiness and a lot of fulfillment just, here. So now we've, of course, downsized our office because our office is now only for the two of us.
Sure.
So we've just got this nice little office. It's comfortable here. I do find that sometimes still it is kind of too quiet, but I am still part of our local user group, and that's always exciting and fun.
And if you look back at your career, do you think you change any decision you made? Was there a job you would have taken? Would have you become a consultant earlier? Is there anything I'm not sure regret is the right word I'm looking for, just something that you wish you had grabbed a hold of that you didn't?
I don't think so, because if I had tried to go into consulting earlier, it might not have been the right time with where Visual Basic was going at the time, not meeting Alan Cooper right at that point in time, not meeting, Robert Scoble right at that time. So I think that it kind of fell into place the way it was supposed to. And, if you would have asked me this question right after, my team sort of dissipated, I would have had a whole more depressed look at it. But Now looking back, I feel like everything sort of fell into place pretty well. And a lot of the people that I had worked with back in the day got, really nice jobs and have done really successful things. And I've had great fun. So I don't know that there is anything I would have done differently. I was always very lucky with work-home balance. And so
You don't have to have an answer.
Yeah. Okay.
No, because I've talked to a number of the guests here, and it's surprising to me how many of them are like, I wish I had an answer for that, but I don't. I feel, many of us, I think, are lucky in that we work in a career doing something we love, and I think a lot of us, when we look out in the world and the people we meet outside of this industry especially, but people we meet in general, we realize just how lucky we are, and perhaps even in some cases overpaid than we should be for enjoying our job as much as we do.
Right.
So where do you see yourself going now? Do you think you're going to be focusing on more and more training? Is that something you're passionate about, or is it just sort of keeping what you're doing, this mix of consulting and training and recording? And
well, I've really enjoyed doing the Pluralsight videos. I think that that's a very fun thing to do because it really can connect you with a lot of people, through email then, and hey, I've seen your course, and, there's questions, and it kind of starts a conversation, and that's always really fun. But in order to do those well, I feel like I want to keep actually doing real project work.
Of course.
Because it really helps me figure out what might be useful for other people to know as well. Yeah. So I'm sort of looking at moving forward, kind of the following the same path that I am now, again, adjusting to technology as technology changes.
Well, there seems to be this thread in what I heard in your stories. You started out really with Basic, and then you moved to Vax Basic, and then you moved to Visual Basic. Is that still a language you're passionate about, or is the language that important to you? I've talked to enough people that there seem to be people on two sides of that fence, as it were. Some people are passionate about language, and other people that are passionate about, that the language is just a tool.
Yeah, I think I'm probably more in the latter camp. A lot of the code I've been writing, like this past year, has been JavaScript because I've been doing a lot of Angular stuff.
Sure.
So there isn't all that much server-side code that I've been writing. Some of the stuff that I've been doing is C# because a lot of companies now are doing C# instead of Visual Basic. And so a lot of my blog posts and stuff have been more C#. Though I still appreciate Visual Basic. I still appreciate its simplicity. I think that it really can still be a good language for people that really don't want to mess around with the semicolons and some of the syntax that is C# and JavaScript. But I'm not necessarily hooked to any language. I think the important thing is to have the right tools to get the job done. And I also really like knowing how my tools work. So a lot of the talks I give are, how to use Visual Studio, because I really like to know how to best use my tools to get the job done.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. It's been great to hear your story. You have any message from Silicon Valley these days?
No, but can I tell you a quick story about my first computer?
Please.
Because we kind of skipped that one.
We did.
And I have it's a short little story.
Take your time.
My first computer was one of the original Apple Macintosh computers back in 1984.
Wow.
Those cute little beige all-in-one boxes.
The ones that look like fish tanks now, yeah.
Yeah. I was in graduate school at the time, and I did one of my assignments using MacWrite. And it had graphs and charts. And so I just went kind of crazy with it, which of course you couldn't have done on a typewriter.
Right.
So even though I got one of the questions on, this 10 question and answer assignment that I'd done. I got an A+ on the assignment because my professor was so impressed with how it looked. So I just thought that was funny. There are some benefits to being an early adopter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's lovely. That's lovely. Well, thanks again. And we'll see you at the next conference.
You bet.
Thanks for listening to the Hello World podcast. Remember, you can subscribe to the Hello World podcast